Welcome to the Nebraska Department of Education's Making It Stick Professional Development webinar series. I'm Dr. Michael Quinn, and I'll be your host for Module 7, Paragraph Writing. Of course, you know when you see a good paragraph, but what are its specific elements, and how do we get there? Have you ever struggled to articulate what constitutes a good paragraph to your students? This webinar will help you help your students construct coherent and purposeful paragraphs. The paragraph writing webinar will take 35 minutes. Throughout this module, we built in some learner engagement activities to ensure your comprehension. When you see the pencil icon, you'll be asked to pause, reflect, engage, and write in your viewing guide. Feel free to stop, start, and rewind as needed. After you complete the module, we'll ask you a few quick questions to see if we've helped you meet the lesson's objectives. Let's get started. Here's our webinar's umbrella question. How can the skill of paragraph writing be developed and honed? Because we want our students to be able to comprehend complex text and create it, first, we'll determine the attributes of a high-quality paragraph. Second, we'll examine strategies for teaching the craft of writing and revising paragraphs. Third, we will design a paragraph frame to scaffold the skill of paragraph writing. Finally, we will plan to support students as they develop and hone the skill of paragraph writing. After this webinar, you'll be able to understand and teach effective paragraph construction to your students. Either by yourself or in a group, let's take some time to reflect on student writing. What do you see as the greatest areas of strength and weakness in your students' writing? There is a 2-column chart in your viewing guide to record your thoughts. Please pause the video for a moment and list your students' strengths and weaknesses in your viewing guide. If you're able, share with your colleagues. Press play when you're ready to resume. Many people define paragraphs in terms of length. However, the unity and coherence of ideas among sentences is what constitutes a good paragraph. Let's take a look at some examples written by well-known authors. In your viewing guide, you will find several exemplary paragraphs. Here's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. And here's Kelly Green's Diversity in the Workplace. And Mandy Oaklander's The New Science of Exercise. And Frederick Douglass's narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. Please pause the video to allow time to read the paragraphs in their entirety through a purely observational lens. Notice what makes them effective, powerful, and a pleasure to read. When you are done reading, press play when you're ready to resume. Either by yourself or in a group, let's take some time to reflect on your own experience as a writer and think about how it connects to your teaching. Please pause the video for a moment and list the additional attributes and elements of a good paragraph in your viewing guide. If you're able, share with your colleagues. Press play when you're ready to resume. In general, what did you notice about each paragraph's effectiveness? Yes, we picked some great ones. You listed several attributes, but did you write any similar comments in your viewing guide? A well-crafted assortment of sentences of varying lengths and types. Sophisticated use of punctuation. Paragraphs of different lengths. Skillful choice of words. Many children are taught to write paragraphs using the Hamburger graphic organizer or something similar. Although this provides a basic structure for students and helps them to visualize the paragraph as a group of sentences with a single focus, the challenge for us as teachers is to decide how to build upon this structural foundation and develop a real craft of writing paragraphs for a variety of purposes and audiences. How do we teach students to manipulate and arrange sentences so their paragraphs flow? How do we teach students to write with texture and depth, to use rich vocabulary, and to say more and say it better. How do we teach students how to write paragraphs that people will enjoy reading? Once we teach students the basic structural foundation of the paragraph, we can begin to plan lessons that may clarify misconceptions such as thinking that paragraphs have to follow a formula or subscribing to the idea that all paragraphs must be 5 sentences long. One way of doing this is to provide students with a piece of text that has indentations deliberately omitted. Ask students to reread the passage and figure out the best place to divide up the passage into paragraphs. This is also the perfect time to teach the Pilcrow, that little backward P that means new paragraph. When you and your students work on this type of activity, you should conclude that paragraphs show readers how information is chunked and connected. Paragraphs indicate to readers when a new idea is coming, and paragraphs are open to interpretation. Pause the video here to practice this exercise using an excerpt from The Mysteries of Mass, which can be found in your viewing guide. Divide the text into paragraphs, identifying your reasoning. If you're able, compare and contrast with your group. Press play when you're ready to resume. Like a building rising brick by brick, paragraphs take shape one sentence at a time, and the individual sentence requires some attention if we are going to help students write great paragraphs. The sentence composing approach, developed by Don Kilgallen, helps students build better sentences imitating model sentences and paragraphs of published authors. When teaching paragraph writing, you may have given students paragraphs to dissect and analyze, but the sentence composing approach takes this a step further using 4-sentence manipulation activities to teach students to write with the skill, depth, and richness of accomplished authors. Linguist Francis Christensen observed that the difference between the writing of professionals and the writing of students is the use of elaboration. According to Don and Jenny Kilgallen, authors of Paragraphs for High School, a sentence composing approach, state-mandated and other writing tests confirm this characteristic of good writing. The biggest reason students perform poorly on such tests is failure to elaborate. Have you found this to be true? Do your students write capable topic sentences and provide some support, only to stop after 2 sentences, unsure what else to say? Sentence composing provides students with models of well-crafted sentences and paragraphs, and integrates grammar, composition, and literature. Students learn the same structures or sentence composing tools that authors use to build sentences and elaborate on their ideas. Unscrambling to imitate, combining to imitate, imitating alone, and expanding. Let's explore each one and work through a few examples to see what students experience. You may be thinking that the sentence composing approach negates every lesson you've taught on plagiarism, that giving students someone else's work to manipulate will condone or even encourage copying. False. Miles Myers, former director of the National Council of Teachers of English, equates imitation to learning to make a chair or a cake. Think about how children learn to speak or play a sport or a musical instrument. All of these skills are acquired through imitation. From a purely classroom instructional standpoint, we can see how the sentence composing approach fits into the core instructional model, introduced in Module 1. Teachers provide a model of the effective use of a skill, and then students actively manipulate the content they have seen modeled. When students unscramble sentences from published texts, they are forced to look closely at every phrase and clause used by the author, and to think about how the discrete parts work together to create meaning. As they unscramble the sentences and reform them into a paragraph, students come to appreciate how the sentences and the paragraph were composed. Let's look at a few unscrambling activities. This introductory activity, understanding sentence parts, helps students develop an understanding of how effective writers arrange their sentence parts. Students are invited to unscramble each sentence 3 times and tell which versions are effective and which ones aren't. Here is an example from Mark Twain's Buck Fanshaw's Funeral. Pause the video here to unscramble the sentence and determine the most effective version. Press play when you're ready to resume. Here's the original. How closely did your sentence resemble Mark Twain's? When you had to look under the hood at how the paragraph was constructed, did it make you see or appreciate the writing in a different way? Is it possible to make the paragraph flow in a different way? In this unscrambling activity, students practice sentence variety by moving sentence parts to new places. Think of this as rearranging the furniture in your home or desks in your classrooms. Many possible configurations could work, but only one may be the perfect fit. Play with it a little to see what works best. As an alternate strategy, unscrambling sentences can also include breaking down each action or event. Students often write a series of short, choppy sentences to express what effective writers can in one. To understand the process, this activity has students take a model sentence and express the content in shorter, simplified sentences. The process of separating model sentences illustrates how much more effective the model sentences are compared to the shorter list of sentences. We expose students to beautifully crafted phrases, sentences, and paragraphs for a variety of reasons. To provoke thinking, to encourage a love of reading, to elicit rich discussions, to model the power of effective writing. But there are times, particularly when we are teaching students to write well, when the use of non-examples can be just as powerful. Listen or read along as I recite this paragraph written by author and writing instructor Gary Provost. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence length, and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I am certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with the energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this. It is important. What impact did the first few sentences have on you as a listener? As a reader? How could the purposeful use of non-examples be used in conjunction with the models of good writing to teach students the importance of effective written communication? Using sentence variety, Provost's last sentence is the most interesting because it is well-paced, punctuated, and uses vivid language. Sentence combining has been identified as a best practice for writing instruction by both researchers and teachers. It is a way to express information and ideas in one sentence instead of several, and to craft sentences that accurately convey the intended meaning. Combining activities ask students to practice combining pairs and lists of sentences into one sentence to resemble the way professional authors write. In the combining to imitate practice, given a list of short sentences, students are asked to combine short sentences to imitate the structure of the model. Students must also add commas to punctuate the parts they insert. Next, they are invited to write an imitation of the sentence they produced using their own content, but imitating the structure of the sentence. Imitation teaches students to emulate the writing style and structure of sentences and paragraphs written by professional writers to internalize those structures for use independently. They will learn and practice how writers vary their sentences and then apply what they have learned to their own writing. Let's take a look at an example. Don Kilgallen offers this imitation activity to practice crafting introductory paragraphs. Students read the first paragraph from John Hersey's Hiroshima, his 1946 report on the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and its aftermath. Next, they interview 6 people about their memories of some event, perhaps the 9/11 attacks, or when Gerald Ford was elected president of the U.S. Students will then write an imitation of Hersey's writing. Like the model, they must be sure to identify each person with a brief phrase before telling what the person was doing at the time. To extend this activity, students could add several more paragraphs elaborating on the activities of the 6 people during the event. The last skill within the sentence composing approach is expanding. Sentence expanding allows students to collaborate with professional writers. In expanding exercises, students are given a part of a sentence by a published author and asked to make additions or expansions to that sentence. This process of addition teaches students to build better sentences and paragraphs by adding structures found in professionally written sentences. One way to expand sentences is to add descriptive words, either a single word or a series of words. Here is an example of a sentence from Mildred Taylor's Roll of Thunder, Hear Me Cry, that was expanded using a series of words. Students will first study the model and then write an imitation using the same structure, but with their own content. The goal is for students to build better sentences and paragraphs. This activity could be made more sophisticated by teaching students to expand with specific structures, such as absolute phrases or adverb clauses. At this point, you may be thinking that you can see the connection to the core instructional model from Module 1, but wondering how students will transfer what they've learned about sentence structure to their own writing. Pause the video here to draft a combining to imitate activity within your content area. Describe your model sentence. Which topic will engage your students? Press play when you're ready to resume. Either by yourself or in a group, let's take some time to reflect on the sentence unscrambling, combining, imitating, and expanding strategies by yourself, with a partner, or in your PLCs. What is the value of unscrambling sentences, of combining, of imitating, of expanding? Do you see any other writing or paragraph lessons embedded in these activities? How could you incorporate sentence combining into your instruction? Please pause the video for a moment and answer the questions in your viewing guide. If you're able, share with your colleagues. Press play when you're ready to resume. Some students may need a more structured approach to writing paragraphs. Paragraph frames are pre-writing tools that help students write well-developed paragraphs. They are skeleton formats that guide the organization and development of ideas. Frame paragraphs offer a scaffold for students to use as they begin to write paragraphs and essays. In addition to providing students with structure, frames will help students learn to use academic language, transition words and phrases, and a variety of sentence types. They can be very generic or specific, depending on the content area, purpose, and level of support needed. Of course, as with the sentence unscrambling activities, the goal is for students to incorporate these skills into their repertoire of strategies and to apply them when writing independently. This is an example of a generic problem-solving paragraph frame adapted from Jeff Swire's Developing Academic Thinking Skills in grades 6 through 12. Think of a few current problems in schools, your community, or the world. Would this paragraph frame help students develop their thoughts? How does it lead them to a solution? And here's an example of a generic current events frame adapted from Kate Kinsella's Brief Constructed Response Routines to Support Reluctant Writers. Would this paragraph frame help students support their position? How does it encourage justification? Frames must be targeted and purposeful. They can inform a peer on a new issue or take a stand on a controversial public policy issue. Think of all the purposes for which your students write in your classroom. Are they writing to express, reflect, inform, explain, evaluate, judge, inquire, describe, analyze, interpret, take a stand, or propose a solution? With those purposes in mind, construct a paragraph frame from your grade level or content area. Use the space provided in the viewing guide to plan either a specific or generic frame you can offer students to support them as they develop or hone their skill of writing effective paragraphs. Try tailoring your frame towards your content area. Pause the video while you construct your frame. Press play when you're ready to resume. The goal for today's webinar was to examine strategies that can be used to develop and hone the skill of paragraph writing. The goal for our students is to walk away with the understanding that paragraphs have a purpose. Paragraphs help readers and writers chunk information together and separate it as well. Paragraphs follow a chain of thought rather than a rote formula. Paragraphs may have any number of sentences. Paragraphs help the reader understand writing. Paragraphs tend to focus on one main idea, and its parts should be related. Either by yourself or in a group, let's take some time to reflect on paragraphs, their purpose, construction, strategies, and connect them to our content area. Think about the new skills or strategies you have learned and how you can apply them to your classroom. Please pause the video for a moment, answer the questions, and outline all 4 activities in your viewing guide. If you're able, share with your colleagues. Press play when you're finished. That brings us to the end of our webinar. Please take a moment to fill out our brief survey by visiting the link provided. Thank you for learning with us today.